Man, I love covering different extremes because last time I talked about Mage, recently, I talked about the Verbena, who are very focused on life magic, as that is their sphere of influence on the seat of the 9 mystic traditions. The Verbena like to claim that technology and our reliance on it makes us weaker. We should return to nature instead. Alright, sure. Counterpoint though, what if? Nuh-uh. Technology, kinda cool, kinda fun. Is it responsible for some bad things? Yes, 100% for sure. Weapons of mass destruction, an overall decline in mental health due to our over-reliance on social media, really shitty cars, the list goes on and on. But today we're talking about the virtual adepts, who cover the sphere of correspondence, and tech wizards, math wizards, a very new tradition on the scene that believes we can use this technology to help society as a whole ascend. Speaking of technology and the dangers thereof, you probably need cybersecurity. So you should check out NordVPN, an affiliate of the channel. Use my links in the description to sign up for either NordVPN or NordPass. Helps out the channel. I do use this, so it's not just me shilling mindlessly. But yeah, the virtual adepts belief system is really reliant on technology, as they are techno-mages, however, they're part of the tradition. It's interesting, right? How did this come about? It's because they defected from the technocracy. For honestly really interesting reasons, which I'll get into in the actual history of the virtual adepts, I think it is better to talk about the belief system of this group before we get into their history. Otherwise, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, just broad strokes here, because this is Mage the Ascension type writing here, where it's written way more complex than it actually is. Not even saying that Mage lore is hard to follow or read, it's just they write in prose, which is fun, it's part of the style of World of Darkness, but a lot of things are written in prose when they probably should be written just abstractly. To break down a very complicated belief system into the most streamlined, basic understanding I can deliver here. The virtual adepts believe that everything in the world is information, everything is data. They're often broken down into math wizards because of this. The universe in reality itself is made up of things that are able to be measured, abstracted, they're able to be calculated. And because it is data and we can do all these things to prove it. Literally, their belief system is provable by the fact that we have such an understanding of physics and in astrophysics, we can actually calculate how a lot of things are going to happen or what has happened. That's all virtual adept proof. And this is a really weird pull. I don't know how many people are going to catch this because I'm not going to look into it. I have no clue how popular this thing is. But when I was younger, when I was a young man, I read a series called Wizard 2.0. First book, Off to be the Wizard. The overall premise of the series is that there is a file that controls the universe. You can open this file and then you'll see data and values for everything. So if you have an understanding of programming, you can actually use this file to edit things in real life. And then the story goes on because the main guy who finds it, much like a lot of other wizards, is chased by the IRS back to medieval England because that's the time when magic is kind of accepted and they pretend to be wizards, when in reality they're just computer programming nerds. This series can be a little bit like Ready Player One, cringy nerd stuff. Reference, it's not as bad. I'll say it holds up better than Ready Player One, to be honest. But I read it when I was younger because it was free on Kindle. But this is actually, the virtual adept belief is that you can edit the world and edit reality through technology. This can be done in a lot of different ways. The key way, though, is through anything that can do calculations. So phones, computers, calculators, abacus, blackboards, you can use all this to cause magic and change reality. You just have to be able to mathematically prove it. It's a fun way of dealing with paradox of showing your work. I would do horrible in this. I suck at math in all regards. There's also a belief system that a lot of newer mages on the scene can wrap their heads around a lot easier, because in our context of the modern world, I am immediately more understanding if somebody programs up a thing, 3D prints a device, I'm like, all right, shit, fair enough. Then if a guy ran up to me like, I'm a wizard, fireball, I'd be doubtful. You'd get paradox backlash, but I'd be more doubtful, and I'm more trusting of the technology, because that's what I'm surrounded by. But on to their actual history, and for the most part, we don't know their history. We can speculate, and there's very loose ideas of the very early precursors, of the virtual adepts that were around the time of the actual formation of the Technocratic Union, but there are hints that developments such as algebra and calculus, a lot of those moments in history, be it like Greek mathematicians, Arabic mathematicians, a lot of that is tracked by these mathematical mages. While they weren't called virtual adepts, or even their other name we'll get to in a second, these can be seen as very early on mages. But eventually the virtual adept precursors were involved in any of those groups that were cracked down on during very heavy religious times. You're doing math and science, that's a bit heretical, eventually forming into secret underground clubs where they can do heretic math. This is also the origin of the Technocratic Union and how they really got started as something combined. Though this group only became a real thing in 1823 with the actual development of the Technocratic Union, where they were known as the Difference Engineers. I think kind of a worse name. A little too similar to Void Engineers. There's a little math joke going in there, but I don't know. They changed it in like 60 years to the virtual adepts. Though in the technocracy, they weren't liked very much, partially because they were a little too optimistic. They asked too many questions. The big kicker was the World Wars, especially World War II. If you want an understanding of World of Darkness and World War II, I have a whole video on that, because every mage sided with the Axis powers. Basically, it is an easier question to say what mages didn't work with the Axis, and more specifically the Nazis. I can tell you right away, the Chakravanti and the virtual adepts, because the virtual adepts in Nazi Germany saw a huge crackdown on science and academia in any regard. You have to follow what the state is telling you to tell, even if it's pseudoscience. Especially if it's pseudoscience. There's a really interesting rabbit hole of history you can go down there. This was even worse if it was Jewish scientists, and they opposed this. They voiced this opinion and were kind of ignored for it. Meanwhile, the Chakravanti were just straight up executing like Nazi mages, based as hell as always. But things would kind of change with the most influential virtual adept who ever lived, Alan Turing. Yes, that Alan Turing. You know, the father of computer science and also the guy that cracked the Enigma cipher. He was like the first virtual adept who was actively working against the Nazis, and the rest followed suit because he's a cool guy. Alongside this project of going against the Nazis, he also invented virtual reality, alongside the Society of Ether, or the Sons of Ether, a tradition group of mages. The technocracy didn't like this. This was treason. So they approached Alan Turing and attempted to blackmail him. They would release information that he was gay if he didn't comply. He didn't, that was released. He didn't comply, that was released around the end of World War II, much like our real history. Alongside that information being released, because this was illegal in the UK back in the day, Alan Turing was chemically castrated for the crime of being gay. I think it goes without saying that that's an awful thing. Fuck anyone involved with that. Awful human beings. It's here that sources kind of differ, because the technocracy, especially the New World Order, claim the normal story. Alan Turing committed suicide after this information was leaked. The virtual adepts claim that the New World Order murdered Alan Turing, hid it as a suicide. This is a part where I get a little iffy, because I feel iffy on including a relatively recent historical figure and his like actual story and the shit he went through. I'm conflicted because on one hand, there's a part of me that thinks this is a little bit in poor taste, and then there's the other part of me is like, would he think it's cool? Because the virtual adept lore treats Alan Turing really respectfully and with a lot of reverence, as he kind of deserves. This guy is responsible for a lot of important shit in our tech development, so kudos. I can only hope that somehow, if Alan Turing could find out that there was a Mage game, and inside the Mage game were a bunch of tech wizards who like revered him and the work he did, I can only hope you'd be like, oh, that's neat, that's kind of fun. I don't know, I'm conflicted. I don't think there's a right answer to how to feel about this. But after Alan Turing's death, the virtual adepts were just completely done with the technocracy. Alan Turing was made a martyr for them. So they defected to the traditions, at least attempted to, because at first the traditions were like, I don't know, it's a little weird. But at the time they had an open seat for the sphere of correspondence due to the traditions being the traditions and being absolutely horrible to a lot of different groups under their control. Eventually they got put on probation, took the seat of correspondence from the Al-Ibatin, and it took a bit, and people still don't really like them because there's a bit of a baggage of like, you guys used to be a technocracy, this is a little weird. Also, we like a lot of older magical traditions and religious shit, and you are actively saying it's stupid and cringe. Because the virtual adepts believe in progress, because the traditions look backwards, like the word tradition kind of implies. They look back towards the heyday of just magical influence, when instead they could look to the future in their ultimate goal of ascending humanity technologically. Because imagine if a guy named Alan Turing made a virtual reality, a literal space in the Umbra, for everyone to eventually move to and ascend and become perfect incorporeal technological beings. Because that's the goal of the virtual adepts. Now, virtual reality, as I've been talking about, is called the digital web. This isn't literally like if you put on your Oculus at home, you're not put inside the Umbra, but this is also a zone, a very specific term for umbral travel, because zone is essentially a place that exists in between different actual umbral spaces. A big example is there's a lot of primordial concepts inside of these. There are zones that are pure fire, pure chaos, pure law. The world of the dreaming from Changeling to Dreaming is inside one of these zones. Anytime you see a werewolf teleport into the Umbra or step sideways, bit more relevant now, Hunter the Parenting, that is using a zone. They were actually able to do this because of their sphere of correspondence. Correspondence, put on the very, very most basic description that's definitely next to me right now. Correspondence is a sphere of space, of locations, as in manipulating the distance or lack thereof between objects. Putting it very basically, this is what allows you to teleport, or do realmic travel and realmic science. It does have some very fun stuff you can do in it. But essentially, if you want to have like a teleport effect or some sort of distance alteration, distance fuckery, it's correspondence. But the digital web is really like a micro universe that is working, building, growing on its own, being developed by different virtual adepts, all in the goal to become a reality 2.0, to be a place where we can transcend to the digital. Just on the surface level, I find that way more interesting than the idea of me transcending existence, becoming a, I don't know, an amorphous blob fart cloud. But this place is developing interestingly because we have the Virgin Web, as it's called, because this place is expanding, where you'll eventually find like a fog wall that is really hazy and is slowly growing, and it grows even better, more clear, as sleeper technology progresses. As Reality 2.0 and the digital web currently stands, it's pretty similar to us just having the internet. Seeing and hearing things, it's great in there. Actually taste, smelling, or feeling is kind of dull. We haven't invented smell-o-vision yet. We should get on that so at least this place can smell nice. Though it also has like corrupted zones, places that have like data damage somewhere in there, and it is a threat. You can like derealize inside of the digital web. There is a threat that if you die in the game, you die for real. Alongside this, you can make your own just locations inside the web. Locations where you have governments over this place, you are building it, you have like admin privileges so you can restrict certain things from happening in your zone, restrict who can come in, and this is where my problems start coming in. Because this is the part in any World of Darkness video, I think it's good to take a step back and remember you're inside the World of Darkness, and the lore in each individual group is written mostly by the people it's covering. So this sounds all like really nice, right? Here's my problem. I immediately get warning signs of tech grifter because some of the ways they talk about Reality 2.0, and granted, this is not intended because chronologically it kind of couldn't have with the release of like Mage 20th and then Mage Revised. This echoes a lot of things said about the metaverse, a noted crypto scam that is peddled by horseshit artists. And on an extra double note, the underlying subtext I personally get about the whole virtual web is, man, it sounds like I'm gonna have my entire life dictated by a Reddit mod. That sounds awful. Cause like there are locations, there's one for Iteration X, they found a way in there, and they have an entire construct that you have to be in some way modified to even step foot in it. And that's just like a bare basic thing. Other places are purely private. Sure, they're like private servers, but the idea, if World of Darkness was real and my entire life could be dictated by a shitty admin, I'm not a fan of that. I think this could be really shitty, totalitarian, really controlling, and an absolute digital hellscape, which personally, I think is a very fun route to take to virtual adepts. Would every single virtual adept believe that? I highly doubt it. However, in World of Darkness, a lot of these entities, vampires, werewolves, mages, they're people trying to live, and sometimes they're people trying to seek power and influence. So they'll do some pretty shitty things, because this is less of, I think the virtual adepts are bad and evil, and more of, I don't know if I trust their vision. But yeah, that's gonna be it. So first and foremost, I want to thank all my channel members who make all these videos possible. I'm super appreciative, and a huge shout out to my top tier channel members. That being Lucky Find 23, Lucky Finds 23, Hazard 650, Pork Chomp, and Czar Shadow. Thank you all so much. It means the world. And then, you know, use the links in my description. Join NordVPN today. Subscribe, join my membership, like, comment, share, do YouTube things. See ya.